Hi everybody, welcome back to Crochet Ray Ray. So today we're not going to crochet, we are going to knit. So I've only been knitting for maybe about 10 years. I started knitting because I was pregnant with my youngest son and I wanted to make him something. And then I had a friend who I saw knitting all the time and I wanted to learn how to knit. But at the time, when I was watching her, I was really frustrated because I couldn't get moving with two hands, right? I know a lot of people are intimidated with using two hands to knit if you're a crocheter because it seems like there's a lot of action going on. And to be truthful, I found it very intimidating. So I used to participate in a group where I was teaching people how to knit. It ended up falling apart because I stopped going, personal reasons. I'm sorry for those who were coming and I was trying to teach you to knit. Some other stuff was happening in my life. But anyway, off topic. So we're going to learn how to knit. And unfortunately, fortunately, there are lots of techniques to casting on, which is the first thing of knitting. But before we get on there, there's some things that we need to discuss of what you need for knitting. Basic knitting, you need yarn. So this is some random skein of yarn in my stash. It's probably Red Heart. I have a lot of that. It's a worsted weight yarn. One of the easiest to use. Oh, I forgot. We need a ball band. Okay, so while I was going through a stash of yarn, let's talk about the ball band. I know I've discussed this in another post, but we shall address it again. So yarn comes in different weights, and all of the weights correspond to the way the yarn knits, how big your stitches are, what kind of needles or hooks you need to use, what kind of project you want to make, all kinds of wonderful things. So this is a jumbo ball of Red Heart, super saver. And you can see that there is this ball band on here, right? So this tells you all kinds of information about the yarn. If there's a dye lot, what's weight yarn, so this is a medium weight yarn, what the swatch would be like if you used these suggested terms. So this is saying if you knit a 4x4, 4-inch by 4-inch swatch, that would be approximately 17 stitches across and 28 rows down. I'm going to guess that they're meaning in garter stitch. Because that's what it kind of looks like, garter stitch. So garter stitch is knitting, the knit stitch back and forth, without switching, which is the easiest. And then there's like crochet terms, temperature, how to wash it, and all that jazz. So this is also saying that we are going to use a US 8 knitting needle size. I would suggest using something a little larger or smaller, depending on what's comfortable in your hand when you're learning some stitches. It just has to do with like getting used to tension and how to hold the needles in your hands and all that jazz. So that's a worsted weight yarn. It's pretty thick. We'll just set that aside. So knitting. Also, what you'll need, knitting needles. These are some vintage Marshalin 10-inch plastic double point knitting needles. I got lots of vintage tools. So double points, 2 ends. That's what that means. These are plastic. Plastic comes in handy with the different kinds of material that you use. I prefer wood a lot of the times, bamboo. There's also metal. This is a crochet hook, not a knitting needle. See the difference? There's a hook on the end of this, and there's points on the end of this. Knitting with 2 needles, crocheting with 1 hook. I can't tell you how much I'm peeved sometimes when people are like, oh, what are you knitting, when I'm actually crocheting? Or what are you crocheting when I'm actually knitting? I know non-crafter, fibery people don't understand these things, but for real, just so you know, knitting, needles, crochet, hook. So, comes in metal. These are metal. This is a cable needle. As you can see, there's a cable that connects the needles. They're pretty slick. They're for like sweaters and hats and like afghans and blankets, scarves that you need a long, when you have a lot of stitches to hold onto your needles. I like to use them as well because if I'm knitting stocking knit, which is the knit stitch, just knitting, instead of turning it around, it's a stocking knit stitch. That's what I prefer. And then, so these are double pointed needles. And then these are single pointed needles. Again, vintage. These are super vintage. Ace from England needles. They were on sale for $1. And they come in this handy dandy case. Popular knitting needles these days. I don't even know how to open this. How do I open this handy dandy pouchy pouch? These haven't even been opened. Ever. Do I want to open the vintage needles? No, I'm not going to. I'm going to get another set of needles. I'm going to hold on to these for posterity. This is a box of very long needles. Knitting needles comes in different sizes. They come in like standard 10-inch, 14-inch. These are 10-inch. These are really long needles. 10-inch, 14-inch. Double points are usually like 5 to 7 inches. My favorite needles are by Knit Picks. They are these beautiful purpley blue needles. That's a US 10. By the way, none of these, this is not sponsored by any particular company. I'm just showing you what to do. Okay, so here is a knitting needle. That is a size 8. I wonder if I have another one of the same size in here. I do not. Here's another. This is acrylic plastic. It's kind of like see-through, like lucite. We're going to use my favorite needles here. So these are my beautiful needles, size 10s. See, there's a size on the end. They're also 6 millimeters for those who use metric. The United States really doesn't use metric. I don't know why. We think we're special. We're going to put these back in the box. And then, I also want to tell you, this is not a knitting needle either. I know it has a cable on it. This is a Tunisian hook, Tunisian cable needle. It's pretty handy for other Afghans and stuff. We're gonna put these away for now. Also, some other things that you might want to have on hand are stitch markers. There are various types of stitch markers. Some people use safety pins. Some people use paper clips. Some people use these like little circly things. I'm trying to find them because I know I got some around here. They're in this other box. Stitch marker, show me a stitch. Stitchy stitch, stitchy stitch. Ah, I'll show you a couple. So they look like these little jumpers. They correspond to like the size needle that you also can go on. Like, so here you would put it in between wherever you need to mark your spot for knitting. That's a pretty little stitch marker. We're gonna put that back in here. So stitch markers. Also, I don't typically use them. I probably should, but you also can get caps for your knitting needles to stop the knitting stoppers, to stop your knitting needles so your work doesn't slip off of the knitting needles. I do have some somewhere. I just don't typically use them. Here's some other stitch markers. These are pretty vintage. I got a lot of vintage stuff. Let's see, plastic little hoop spruies. We'll stick this back on there. Who knows how long this has been on there. This needle's pretty rusty. I'm probably not going to be able to get that back on there. Oh, I did. Haha. We'll stick this back in this thing. I thought I was going to make some stitch markers, so I got like some cool like beads and stuff to make my own stitch markers. I will get around to it. I just haven't lately. So yeah, that's some stuff that you initially need for knitting. Also, I'm trying to think. See, here's a jumbo stitch marker. I don't typically, like I said, I don't typically use stitch markers in any case. We shall put these things away. Ooh, a bead. Oh my God, I got some beads in and they're everywhere. I dropped them everywhere. Beads. Okay, so back to knitting. So, knitting. The first thing that most people want to do when you start knitting is to think about the project that you might want to consider doing. And then we determine the stitches that we're going to use and we make a swatch. So because, you know, we're practicing for our future projects, I would suggest making a swatch or a very long rectangle for like a scarf or something. It's gonna look horrible. You're probably gonna drop some stitches. That's okay, because every knitter goes through this process. All right, that is, did I cover everything? Oh, also necessary, a project bag. You want to put your work into a bag. Some people use Ziploc bags. Some people use little tote bags. Some people use other kinds of bags. There's actually people who make project bags. I've got a ton of project bags. and just somewhere so you can store your knitting. So, you know, you can put your yarn somewhere, travel around with it. I travel with yarn all of the time. All the projects have a bag so I can take it with me. All right. So knitting needles, yarn, stitch markers. That's really all you really need for the first thing to do. And some patience. Patience is necessary. You will get frustrated. I promise. I got frustrated. And I've been crafting my whole entire life. So let's move on.